The following history is given in a series of letters, which principally in a double yet separate correspondence between two young ladies of virtue and honor, bearing an inviolable friendship for each other and writing upon the most interesting subjects, and between two gentlemen of free lives, one of them glorying in his talents for stratagem and invention, and communicating to the other in confidence all the secret purposes of an intriguing head and resolute heart. But it is not amiss to premise, for the sake of such as may apprehend hurt to the morals of youth, from the more freely written letters, that the gentlemen, though professed libertines as to the fair sex, and making it one of their wicked maxims to keep no faith with any of the individuals of it who throw themselves into their power, are not, however, either infidels or scoffers, nor yet such as thinkers themselves freed from the observance of other moral obligations. On the contrary, it will be found in the progress of the collection that they very often make reflections upon each other, and each upon himself and upon his actions, as reasonable beings who disbelieve not a future state of rewards and punishments, and who one day propose to reform, must sometimes make one of them actually reforming and antidoting the poison which might otherwise apprehend would be spread by the gayer pen and lighter heart of the other. And yet that other, although in an unbosoming himself to a select friend, he discovers wickedness enough to entitle him to general hatred, preserves a decency as well as in his images and in his language, which is not always to be found in the works of some of the most celebrated modern writers, whose subjects and characters have less warranted the liberties that they have taken. Length will be naturally expected not only from what has been said, but from following considerations: that the letters on both sides are written while the hearts of the writers must be supposed to be wholly engaged in their subjects, the events at the time generally dubious, so that they abound not only with critical situations, but with what may be called instantaneous descriptions and reflections, which may be brought home to the breast of a youthful reader, as always with affecting conversations, many of them written in dialogue or dramatic way. To which may be added that the collection contains not only the history of the excellent person whose name it bears, but includes the lives, characters, and the catastrophes of several others, either principally or incidentally concerned in the story. But yet the editor to whom it is referred to publish the whole in such a way as he should think that would be most acceptable to the public, but was so diffident in relation to this article of length that he thought proper to submit the letters to the perusal of several judicious friends, whose opinion he desired of what might be best spared. One gentleman, in particular, of whose knowledge, judgment, and experience, as well as candor, the editor has highest opinion, advised him to give a narrative turn to the letters, and to publish only what concerned the principal heroine, striking off the collateral incidents and all that related to the second characters, though he allowed the parts which would have been by this means excluded to be both instructive and entertaining. But being extremely fond of the affecting story, he was desirous to have everything parted with, which he thought retarded its progress. This advice was not relished by other gentlemen. They insisted that the story could not be reduced to a dramatic unity nor thrown into a narrative way without divesting it of its warmth and of a great part of its efficacy, as very few of the reflections and observations which they looked upon as the most useful part of the collection would then find a place. They were of opinion that in all the works of this, and of all the dramatic kind, story, and amusement, should be considered as more than the vehicle to more necessary instruction, that many of the scenes would be rendered languid were they to be made less busy, and that the whole would therefore be deprived of that variety which is deemed the soul of a feast, whether mensal or mental. They were also of the opinion that the parts and characters which must be omitted if this advice were followed were some of the most natural in whole collection and no less instructive, especially to youth, which might be considerable, perhaps overlooked by gentlemen of the advisor's great knowledge and experience. For as they observe, there is a period in human life in which youthful activity, ceasing and hoping, contenting itself to look from its own domestic wicked upon bounded prospects, that the half-tired mind aims at more than amusement, and with reason, for what in the instructive way can appear either new or needful to one who has happily got over the dangerous situations which call for advice and cautions, and who has filled up his measures of knowledge to the top. Others likewise gave their opinions, but no two being of the same mind as to the parts which could be omitted, it is resolved to present the world the two first volumes by way of specimen, and to be determined with regard to the rest by the reception that those should meet with. If that be favorable, two others may soon follow, the whole collection being ready for the press. That is to say, it is not found necessary to abstract or omit some of the letters in order to reduce the bulk of the whole. Thus, much in general, it must be amiss to add in particular that the great variety of subjects which this collection contains is one of the principal views of the publication, to caution parents against the undue exertion of natural authority over their children in the great article of marriage, and children against preferring a man of pleasure to a man of probity, upon that dangerous but too commonly received notion that a reformed rake makes the best husband. But as the characters will not appear in the first two volumes, it has been advisable, in order to give the reader some further idea of them and of the work, to prefix a brief account of the principal characters through the whole. The principal characters. Miss Clarissa Harlowe, a young lady of great delicacy, mistress of all accomplishments natural and acquired, that adorn the sex, having the strictest notions of filial duty. Robert Lovelace, Esquire, a man of birth and fortune, haughty, vindictive, humorous, vain, equally intrepid, and defatigable in the pursuit of his pleasures, making his addresses to Miss Clarissa Harlowe. James Harlowe, Esquire, the father of Miss Clarissa, Miss Arabella, and Mr. James Harlowe, despotic, absolute, and when offered, not easily forgiven, and when offended, not easily forgiven. Lady Charlotte Harlowe, his wife, mistress of fine qualities, but greater under the influence not of her arbitrary husband, but of her son. James Harlowe, Jr., proud, fierce, uncontrollable, ambitious, jealous of the favor his sister Clarissa stood in with the principals of the family, and a bitter and irreconcilable enemy to Mr. Lovelace. Miss Arabella Harlowe, elder sister of Miss Clarissa, ill-natured, overbearing, petulant, envying her sister, and the more at Mr. Lovelace, was first brought to make his address to herself. John Harlowe, Esquire, elder brother of Mr. James Harlowe, Sr., an unmarried gentleman, good-natured and humane, but is easily carried away by more boisterous spirits. Anthony Harlowe, third brother, who has acquired a great fortune in the Indies, positive, rough, opinionated. Mr. Roger Solmes, a man of sordid manners, disagreeable in his person and address, immensely rich, proposed with a high hand for a husband to Miss Clarissa Harlowe. Miss Hervey, half-sister of Lady Charlotte Harlowe, a lady of good sense and virtue, in her heart against the measures taken to drive her niece to extremities, but not having the courage to oppose herself to so strong a stream, sailing with it. Miss Dolly Hervey, her daughter, good-natured, gentle, sincere, and a great admirer of her cousin Clarissa. Mrs. Norton, a gentlewoman of piety and good understanding, the daughter of an unpreferred clergyman of great merit, whose amnesia was married unhappily and left a widow, engaged to nurse Clarissa Harlowe, in whose education likewise she had a principal share. Mrs. Norton. Colonel Morden, a man of fortune, generosity, and courage, nearly related to the Harlow family, but for some time past is residing at Florence. Miss Howe, the most intimate friend and companion and correspondent of Clarissa Harlow, of great vivacity, fire, and fervency in her friendships and her anonymities. Mrs. Howe, mother of Miss Howe, a widow lady of high spirit, a notable manager having high notions of parental authority. Mr. Hickman, a man of family fortune, sobriety, and virtue, encouraged by Mrs. Howe in the address to her daughter. Lord M., uncle to Mr. Lovelace, a nobleman of middle genius and of great proverbiness. Lady Sarah Sadler, Lady Betty Lawrence, half-sisters of Lord M., widow ladies of honor and fortune. Miss Charlotte and Patty Montague, maiden ladies of character, nieces of the same nobleman. Dr. Lewin, a divine of great piety and learning, to whom Clarissa Harlow owes much of her improvement. Dr. H., a physician of humanity, generosity, and politeness. Mr. Elias Brand, a pedant young clergyman, fond of Latin scraps and classical quotations. Richard Mowbray, Tom Dolman, James Turville, Thomas Belton, libertine gentlemen, companions of Mr. Lovelace. John Belford, Esquire, a fifth friend and companion of Mr. Lovelace, and his principal intimate and confidant. Mrs. Sinclair, the pretended name of a private brothel keeper in London. Captain Tomlinson, the assumed name of a vile and artful pander to the debaucheries of Mr. Lovelace. Mrs. Moore, a widow gentleman keeping her lodging house at Hampstead. Miss Rollins, a notable young gentlewoman in that neighborhood. Mrs. Beavis, a lively widow of the same place. Sally Morton, Polly Horton, assistants of and partners with the infamous Mrs. Sinclair. Joseph Lehman, William Summers, Hannah Burton, Betty Bonds, Dorcas Whites, and others, servant to the principal persons. Letter 1. Miss Anna Howe to Miss Clarissa Harlow. I am extremely concerned, my dear friend, for the disturbances, January 10th, for the disturbances that have happened in your family. I know how it must hurt you to become the subject of public talk, and yet, upon an occasion so generally known, it is impossible that whatever relates to a young lady whose distinguished merits have made her the public care should engage everybody's attention. I have longed to have particulars from yourself, and of usage I am told you receive upon an accident you could not help, and in which, as far as I can learn, the sufferer was the aggressor. Mr. Diggs, whom I sent for at the first hearing of the recounter to inquire for your sake how your brother was, told me that there was no danger from the wound, if there were none from the fever, which whom it was increased by the pertation of his spirits. Mr. Wiley drank tea with us, and though he is far from being partial to Mr. Lovelace, as it may be supposed, yet both he and Mr. Symes blame your family for the treatment they gave him when he went in person to inquire after your brother's health, and to express his concern for what happened. They say that Mr. Lovelace could not avoid drawing his sword, and that either your brother's unskillfulness or violence left him from the very first pass entirely in his power. This, I'm told, was what Mr. Lovelace said upon it, retreating as he spoke. Have care, Mr. Harlow. Your violence puts you out of your defense. You give me too much advantage. For your sister's sake, I will pass by everything if. But this is the more provoked his rashness to lay himself open to the advantage of his adversary, who, after a slight wound in the arm, took away his sword. There are people who love not your brother because of his natural imperiousness and fierce and uncontrollable temper. These say that the young gentleman's passion was abated on seeing his blood gush, plentifully down his arm, and that he received the generous offices of his adversary, who helped him off with his coat and waistcoat, and bound with his arm, till the surgeon told could come, with such patience as was far from making a visit afterwards from the adversary to inquire after his health appear either insulting or improper. But this may everybody pities you, so steady, so uniform in your conduct, so desirous, as you've always said, of sliding through life to the end of it unnoted, and, as I may add, not wishing to be observed even for your silent benevolence, sufficiently happy to in the noble consciousness of what rewards may come. Rather useful, glaring, you deserved motto, though now pushed into blaze, as we see, to your regret, and yet blamed at home for the faults of others. How must such a virtue suffer on every hand? Yet it must be allowed that your present trial is but proportional to your prudence, as all of your friends without doors are apprehensive that some other unhappy event may result from so violent a contention, in which it may seem that the families on both sides are now engaged. I must desire you to enable me, on the authority of your own information, to do occasional justice. My mamma and all of us, like the rest of the world, talk of nobody but you on this occasion, and of the consequence which may follow from the resentments of a man of Mr. Lovelace's spirit, who, as he gives out, has been treated with high indignity by your uncles. My mamma will have it that you cannot now, with any decency, either see him or correspond with him. She is a good deal prepossessed by your Uncle Anthony, who occasionally calls upon us, as you know, and of this recounter has represented to her the crime in which it would be in a sister to encourage a man who is to wade into her favor, this is his expression, through the blood of her brother. Write to me, therefore, my dear, the whole of your story from the time that Mr. Lovelace was first introduced to your family, and particularly an account of all that has passed between him and your sister, about which there are different reports. Some of people suppose that the younger sister, at least by her uncommon merit, has stolen a lover from the elder, and pray in such a manner that it may gratify those who know not how much of your affairs as I do, if anything unhappy should fall out from the violence of such spirits as you have to deal with, your account of all things previous with it be your justification. You see what you draw upon yourself by excelling all your sex. Every individual of it knows you and has heard of you, seems to think you answerable to her or for your conduct in points so very delicate and concerning. Every eye, in short, is upon you with the expectation of an example. I wish to heaven you were at liberty to pursue your own methods. All would then, I dare say, be easy and honorably ended. But I dread your directors and directresses, for your mamma, admirably well qualified as she is to lead, must submit to be led. Your sister and brother will certainly put you out of your course. But this is a point you will not permit me to expatiate on. Pardon me, therefore, I have done. Yet why should I say, pardon me, when your concerns are my concerns, when your honor is my honor, when I love you as never woman loved another, and when you have allowed of that concern and of that love, and have the years, which in persons so young may be called many, ranked in the first class of your friends. Yours ever grateful and affectionate, Anna Howe. Will you oblige me with a copy of the preamble of the clauses to your grandfather's will in your favor, and allow me to send it to my Aunt Harmon? She is very desirous to see it, yet your character is so charmed her that, though a stranger to you personally, she assents to the preferences given to you in it before she knows his reasons for that preference. Letter 2. Miss Clarissa Harlowe to Miss Howe. Harlowe Place, January 13th. How you oppress me, my dearest friend, with your politeness. I cannot doubt your sincerity, but you should take care that you should give me not reason from your kind partiality to call into question your judgment. You do not distinguish that I take many admirable hints from you, and have the art to pass them upon you for my own. In all that you do, in all that you say, nay, in the very looks so animated, you give lessons to one who loves you and observes you as I love and observe you, without knowing that you do. So pray, my dear, be more sparing of your praise for the future, lest after this confession we should suspect that you secretly intend to praise yourself, while you would be thought only to commend another. Our family has indeed been strangely discomposed. Discomposed! It has been in tumults ever since the unhappy transaction, and I have borne all the blame. Yet you should have too much concern for myself, as I have been more justly spared by everyone else. For, whether it be owing to a faulty impatience, having been too indulgently treated to be inured to blame, or to the regret I have to hear those censured on my account, whom it is my duty to vindicate, I have sometimes wished that it had been pleased God to have taken me in my last fever, when I had everybody's love and good opinion, but oftener that which had never been distinguished by my grandpa as I was, which has estranged me. I doubt my brother and my sister's affection, at least, has raised a jealousy with regard to the apprehended favor of my two uncles, that now and then overshadow their love. My brother, being happily recovered of his fever and his wound in a hopeful way, although he has not yet ventured abroad, I will be as particular as you desire in the little history of you demand of me. But heaven forbid that anything should ever happen in which I may require it to be produced for the purpose you so kindly mention. I will begin as you command, with Mr. Lovelace's address to my sister, and will be as brief as possible. I will recite facts only, and leave you to judge of the truth of the report raised by the younger sister has robbed the elder. I was in pursuance of a conference between Lord M. and my uncle Anthony, that Mr. Lovelace, my papa and mamma not forbidding, paid his respects to my sister Arabella. My brother was then in Scotland, busying himself in viewing the condition of the considerable estate which was left to him there by generous godmother, together with one considerable in Yorkshire. I was also absent at my dairy house, as it is called, busied in the accounts relating to the estate which my grandfather had the goodness to bequeath me, which once a year, footnote, her grandfather, in order to invite her as often as her friends would spare her, indulged her in erecting and fitting a dairy house for her own taste. When finished, it was so much admired for its elegant simplicity and convenience that the whole seat before the old time was situated was called the Grove, generally known as the Dairy House. Her grandfather was particularly fond of having it called such. Are left to my inspection, although I have given the whole into my papa's power. My sister made me visit there the day after Mr. Lovelace had been introduced, and seemed highly pleased with the gentleman. His birth, his fortune, in possession clear £2,000 a year, as Lord N. had assured my uncle, presumptive heir to that nobleman's large estate, his great expectations from Lady Sarah Sadler and Lady Betty Lawrence, who his uncle interested very warmly, he being the last of his line, to see him married. So handsome a man, oh, her beloved Clary! For then she was ready to love me dearly, and from the overflowings of her good humor on his account. He was but too handsome a man for her. Were she but an amiable as somebody, there would be a probability of holding his affections. For he was wild, she heard, very wild, very gay, loved intrigue, but he was young, a man of sense, who would see his error. Could she but have patience with his faults, if his faults were not cured by marriage? Thus she ran on, and then wanted me to see the charming man, as she called him, again concerned that he was not handsome enough. She was not handsome enough for him, with a sad thing that the man should have the advantage of the woman in that particular. But then, stepping to the glass, she complimented herself, that she was very well, that were there many women deemed passable who would be inferior to her, that she was always thought comely, and let her tell me that her comeliness had not so much to lose as beauty had would hold, when that would evaporate and fly off. Nay, for that matter. And again she turned to the glass. Her features were not irregular, her eyes not all amiss, and I remember they were more than usually brilliant at that time. Nothing, in short, to be found fault with, though nothing very engaging, she doubted. Was there, Clary? Excuse me, my dear, I never was this particular before, no, not to you, nor would I now have written thus freely of a sister, but that she makes a merit to my brother of disowning that she ever liked him, and that I shall mention hereafter, and then you will always have to give me your minute descriptions, nor suffer me to pass by the air and the manner in which things are spoken that are to be taken notice of, rightfully observing that air and manner often express more than the accompanying words. I congratulated her on her prospects. She received my compliments with a great deal of self-complacency. She, like the gentleman still more at her next visit, visit, and yet she made no particular address to her, although an opportunity was given him for it. Although he made no particular address to her, although an opportunity was given for him to do so. This was wondered at, as my uncle had introduced him into our family declarately as a visitor to my sister. But as we were ever ready to make excuses when in good humor with ourselves for the supposed slights of those whose approbation we wished to engage, so my sister found out a reason, much to Mr. Lovelace's advantage. For his not improving the opportunity that was given to him, it was bashfulness, truly in him. Bashfulness in Mr. Lovelace, my dear? Indeed, gay and lively as he has not the look of an imprudent man. I fancy as it may, many years ago, since he was bashful. Thus, however, could my sister make it out? Upon her words, she believed Mr. Lovelace deserved not the bad character he had as to women. He was really, to her thinking, a modest man. He would have spoken out, she believed, but once or twice, as he seemed to intend to do so, but under so agreeable a confusion, such a profound respect to show her, a perfect reverence, she thought. She loved dearly that a gentleman in courtship would show a reverence to his mistress. So indeed we all do, I believe, with reason, since I may judge from what I have seen in many families, there is little enough of it shown afterwards. As she told my Aunt Hervey that she would be a little less upon reserve next time he came, she was not one of those flirts, not she, who would give pain to a person who deserved to be well treated, and the more for the greatness of his value for her. I wish she had not somebody whom I love in her eye, yet not her censure unjust, I believe. Is it not, my dear? Excepting in one undue and harsh word. In the third visit, Bella governed herself by this kind and considerate principle, so that, according to her own account of the matter, the man might have spoken out, but he was still bashful. He was not able to overcome the unseasonable reverence, so this visit went off as the former. But now she began to be dissatisfied with him. She compared his general character with a particular behavior to her, and having never been courted before, owned herself puzzled as to how to deal with such an odd lover. What did the man mean? Had not her uncle brought him declarately as a suitor to her? It could not be bashfulness, now she thought of, since he might have opened his mind to her uncle. If she wanted courage to speak directly to her, not that she cared much for the man neither, but it was right, surely, that a woman should not be put out of doubt early as to the man's intention in such a case as this, from his own mouth. But truly she had begun to think that he was more solicitous to cultivate her mamma's good opinion than hers. Everybody, she owned, admired her mamma's conversation, but he was mistaken if he thought that that would do with her. And then, for his own sake, surely he put it in her power to be more complacent with him, if he had given her cause for approbation. This distant behavior she must take upon her to say, was more extraordinary, as he continued his visits and declared himself extremely desirous to cultivate a friendship with the whole family, as he could have no doubt about her sense if she might take upon her to join her own with the general opinion. He having taken great notice and admired many of her good things as they fell from her lips. Reserves were painful, she must needs to say, to open and free spirits like hers. And yet she must tell my aunt, to whom she was very direct, that she should never forget what she owed to her sex and to herself. Were Mr. Lovelace an unexceptional in his morals as in his figure, and were he to urge his suit so ever so warmly? I was not of her counsel. I was still absent, and it was agreed between my Aunt Hervey and her that she would be quite solemn and shy in his next visit if there was not a peculiarity in his address to her. But my sister, it seems, had not considered the matter well. This was not the way, as it proved to be taken with the man of Mr. Lovelace's penetration, for matters of mere omission, nor with any man, since if love had not taken root deep enough to cause it to shoot out into declaration, if an opportunity be fair given to it, that there was little room to expect that the blighting winds of anger or resentment will bring it forward. Then my poor sister, it was not naturally good-humored, this too well known a truth for me to endeavor to conceal it, especially from you. She must therefore, I doubt, have appeared to great disadvantage when she aimed to be worse tempered than the ordinary. I will now continue with page 44 in the next recording.